So, in talking about then this game that's played an infinite number of times with then this trigger strategy, the example we have here then is what would these firms decide to do if the game is being played multiple times. Here we're looking at interest rates being charged and them trying to decide what price they're going to charge. Are they going to charge high price, low price, and then what's the payoff as a result? Or the profits as a result of charging either a high interest rate or a low interest rate. Again, the way that you think about this is you think about this in terms of their strategy. And in this case, the collusion, right, would be them both agreeing to charge the high price. And they could have a mutually agreeable higher price. If one decides to defect or do something other than what they promised, right, that would really hurt that one person. But the idea here would be that if the collusion broke down, if they didn't finally get frustrated with it, they know that they would end up here. It would be better over the long run to settle at a joint profit level of 10. So then what can we do? We could actually solve this then with, we could try to solve this in a fashion where I take into account the future values of the profits, right? And I could say, what does that difference mean to me in terms of future profits earned? And in terms of the future values, we see obviously that it's reduced by the fact that the inflation rate as well is going to ensure that it's going to make the possible future profits not seem as great. In terms of that present value, what we're seeing here then is that in this case here, that the difference in the profits after we take into account the future values, that if each firm, this $50 value that they could each have by defecting, if the present value of it, since it is greater than $35, they both in their own individual best interest would face an incentive to defect, and they know that about the other one as well. So even though this would be collusionary, and if the game were played in an infinite number of times, they might have ended up here, because the present value of the possible outcome is greater than 35, they end up being in a Nash equilibrium as the trigger strategy here. This is presuming or assuming a few things that are going on here. That we know who our rivals are, we know who our competitors are, that the customers are well aware of the prices, and that they have no allegiance to any one company. So whoever charges the best price is the one that they're going to go to. Oh no. And what we also know is that the firms will be able to punish their rival by doing this, by charging those different prices. So what would you as a manager then have to be thinking about? You would have to, when you're thinking about these this collusionary behavior here, you would need to be thinking about in your oligopoly, how many firms are you competing with? What's the size of your firm? What's the kind of the price competitive structure? And how can I punish the players that do something different than what they intended? The airline industry is a perfect example of having intense price competition, an ability to punish others. And outside of there being frequent flyer miles and such, customers don't really have a lot of allegiance to individual airlines. Now, what about the game that's played only a finite number of times? So if the game is no longer played in an infinite fashion, then it would be helpful to know when the game is going to end. that would be there'd be a different kind of game. It could be played a finite number of times, but we might not know how many times it will be played. So, what are we going to see here? Is that then I need to think about the probability that the game will end at a certain point. We will see that I may end up using, if the time period that the game is going to be played, if it's an uncertain number of times, then we're going to see that I'm probably going to use trigger strategies. But I'm probably going to end up at the same kind of situation where I'll be here initially, but then because of those trigger strategies and the probability of the game being played, of the game being about to end, I may end up being at the mutually assured and mutually unhappy equilibrium of the low price, low price. Now, what if I know how long the game is going to last? Then we're going to see that we're going to end up at the Nash equilibrium almost right away. And that Nash equilibrium is going to be that I immediately go to the low price, low price. I'm not even going to end up here because I already know that the game's going to end. And I know that as I get closer and closer to that end game, that last game, I'm going to see that defection. So I'm just going to start right here, right away. So what we saw there was that unknown number of times we use trigger strategies, known finite number of times we'll just use our Nash equilibrium. And then finally here I need to talk about the multi-stage game. And in the multi-stage game here, now I'm thinking about sequential moves rather than simultaneous moves. To do this, I need to have an extensive form of the game, because this extensive form of the game will say, if player A decides this, then I will choose this, and so on and so forth. And so then what you see here is instead of a payoff matrix, you'd see decision nodes where player A decides to go up, then B could choose to go up or down. And we see the payoffs then listed here. That's how you would read this at least. And you do the same thing here. You have to find a Nash equilibrium. So then I need to compare my payoffs and look at my payoffs in terms of what do either of the players have a dominant strategy. If they don't have a dominant strategy, then I could think about this occurring in a randomized sort of way. And we could imagine that within these multi-stage games that there are sub-game perfect equilibriums. And this would be that basically once players pick a strategy, they face no incentive to change their strategy because they're not going to get a higher payoff from changing their strategy. So you end up getting an equilibrium because of the cost of changing your decision process. And this is what you see right here. Instead of a Nash equilibrium, I get a sub-game perfect equilibrium. If player A is choosing up, then player B chooses up. If player A chooses down, then player B chooses down. That's your notion of a sequential sub-game perfect equilibrium. Why does this matter to you as a manager? Well, the way in which it matters to you would be, for instance, do you introduce a new product as a result of a competitor introducing a new product or a new pricing strategy? You see this in the cell phone industry all the time in terms of the packages they offer, in terms of data, the phones they offer. You see this exact kind of sequential game sub-perfect equilibrium. Okay.